Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Katie Zhao. She is here to celebrate her debut middle grade fantasy, The Dragon Warrior. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing, and my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome, awesome, awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Joining us on the line right now from Detroit in the great state of Michigan. She is here to celebrate her debut middle grade fantasy called The Dragon Warrior. Please welcome to the show, Katie Zhao. Katie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jed. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I am well, I have to be honest, I'm a little cold. Last week I was in the pool, and this week I'm freezing. I'm just too old for this, I think.
Yeah, it's the same in Michigan, though. It's just really cold and then randomly really hot and randomly really cold again.
Katie and I were reminiscing about Detroit's airport and how beautiful it is and how big it is and how hard it is running.
Very big.
So, Katie, tell us about The Dragon Warrior, please.
I would love to. So The Dragon Warrior is my debut middle grade fantasy novel. It's based in Chinese mythology, and I like to think of it as Percy Jackson meets the work of Grace Lin. So it's basically Percy Jackson, but with Chinese mythology, and it follows the story of a 12-year-old warrior girl named Farron Liu, and she lives in a secret warrior society in San Francisco's Chinatown called the Jade Society. And she and her brother are sort of seen as outcast children in this society because they don't quite look like the other warriors, and their father has gone missing, and they never knew their mother. So the story starts during the Lunar New Year when Farron sneaks out into Chinatown, and she joins the parade, and then the Nian monster attacks. And she is the one who ends up saving Chinatown. And from there on, she goes onto a quest that was given to her, or given to the warriors by the gods, and she journeys across Chinatowns in the U.S. and befriends lots of dragons and makes friends with and enemies out of some gods. So that's lovely. And the sequel is called The Fallen Hero, and it actually comes out next month, October 13th. So that's pretty exciting too.
That is exciting. You know, one thing, as you were talking, and talking about your characters being in Chinatown and then visiting various Chinatowns across the United States, it just occurred to me, everywhere that I've traveled to, and I haven't traveled all that extensively, but every country that I've traveled to, there's been a Chinatown in at least their capital city, if not other capital cities, other major cities. And so Chinese culture is all around us, all around the world, but I don't think a lot of people really know much about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, I think part of it does have to do with just representation and who is allowed to have a voice and say in the stories that are passed on down to, the children, passed around society. And that was something I noticed growing up, was that of course I went to Chinese school, so I learned Chinese there. I learned Chinese mythology from some books and shows that my parents knew growing up that they showed my siblings and me. But without access to that, I wouldn't have had access to knowing and learning about Chinese mythology or culture. So I think I honestly just think it really does have to do with the power dynamics of, who is allowed to have a say in the stories that we're giving to young readers and older readers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's important, I think, and we've talked a lot about the importance of representation here on the podcast. Tell me, why do you think it's so important?
I feel on, a very personal, deep level, the importance of representation. I grew up here, as you and I were discussing earlier, I grew up in the Metro Detroit area in Michigan. And around here, there's like a small Asian community. I was able to have access to Chinese school, and I did have some Chinese friends, so I wasn't totally alone, but I always felt I was very much in the minority. And I was always, the introvert growing up. I was the kid who always had a book every day, and usually a new book every day. I was a very fast reader. I loved watching movies and TV shows, but everything I consumed I never saw myself in those stories. Or if I did, it was like only to the level that, I can relate to this struggle this character is going through. It was never, this character looks like me, and I just have this deeper connection with this character. And I think when kids grow up without being able to see themselves in, media, they internalize the message that they aren't worthy of being represented and that society doesn't even see them. And so I think for young readers especially, it's so important to have not only representation, but good representation for them, because bad representation is, a whole other can of worms. And I would say that's also very damaging if kids, the only representation they get is like a stereotype or showing people who look like them doing negative things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I think it really colors the way that readers see themselves and see how they fit into the world. And that's why I'm always all about the representation.
You said something that very interesting, and it kind of hit my heart. You said that not seeing yourself represented in books kind of made you feel like you were invisible to the greater society.
Yeah.
I'm trying to imagine putting myself in that position, and that must have been an incredibly painful kind of revelation for you.
I think it was, I don't know if I understood how painful it was until I grew up. And, now we see movements in publishing where people who look like me or who don't look like me but who are also underrepresented are finally getting their stories out there. And it feels like healing, because I don't think I realized how much I lacked growing up until I started seeing books with characters who looked like me, and I realized I really could have used this when I was younger. I remember very distinctly I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and my thought back then was, I wish I could be white. I wish I could be like, these girls and boys who are white who, live this totally different lifestyle from me, but their lives seem so great, and they're going off on magical adventures, or they're, having sleepover parties, with their friends. And that was all I read about or saw on screen. And for me, it was very difficult to ever feel like I belonged without seeing someone who looked like me belonging in this world.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've said here on the podcast so many times, and it's because I don't have your experience, so I didn't live that, and so it's hard for me to place myself in your position. But I also feel that it is so very, very important to see Asian characters, to see black characters, to see Latino characters, to see Native American characters, indigenous characters, because for me, I want to be exposed to those characters and cultures and people. I think it's an incredible disservice to me that that I'm missing out on this, all these different cultures and knowledge. I was sharing with Katie before the show, we've hosted a number of international kids in our home and a number of young women from China. And I remember taking this one particular woman around Boston, and I was very proud to point out Paul Revere's home, and I said, that home is almost 300 years old. And she wasn't impressed. And when we went home and we went online and looked at her city, and I saw that there was a bridge in her city that was 1,200 years old. Then I said, oh, duh. So, I mean, there's so much that we've missed out, that I missed out on. And I just think having own voices, having books with characters from all these different cultures is so important for everyone.
I absolutely love and agree with everything you just said. For me, when I was younger, I remember thinking, I wish I weren't Chinese. I don't want to go to Chinese school. Like, I just want to be like everyone else, look like everyone else. Now that I'm older, I've grown so much appreciation for my culture and my roots. I'm so glad I grew up going to Chinese school. I don't use the language as much anymore, but I understand it, and I know stories that, a lot of other kids wouldn't know because, they're not Chinese or they never had access to learning about Chinese. And I just feel like there's such a wealth of different kinds of stories in me that, I like to say that my writing brand is that I'm like kind of meshing Chinese and American stories and storytelling methods together. And that's something that I deeply enjoy doing because it feels like healing for me, as well as what I really hope to do is show American readers, like, this is a totally different experience from maybe what you've had. But, I think it's an experience that's worth sharing, and, hopefully you'll enjoy reading about it.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned that there's different ways of telling stories in these different cultures.
Absolutely.
Tell me, do we experience some of that in The Dragon Warrior, some of that Chinese storytelling techniques?
Oof, this is a deep question. I would say, actually, I based this particular story more on the, a traditional quest narrative, that the chosen one, Baron Liu is the main character. She's chosen for a quest, and just like Percy Jackson, she goes, all across the country and, defeats all these bad demons and eventually saves the world, right? And I'd say Chinese storytelling is more, I would say it's more slow paced. I like to think of Journey to the West, which is an epic Chinese tale, that's just so embedded in this very deep mythology and fantasy. But it's more episodic and it's slower. There are moments where the characters aren't really doing that much, and in American publishers would say, oh, the pacing is too slow. We need to cut out this scene. Mm-hmm. But I think, I always enjoyed slower scenes in Journey to the West or in Eastern narratives. And, I think that's something that, I've come to realize Western publishers will likely say we have to amp the pacing and tension in these scenes if I tried to write something more Eastern style, but that's something that I'm just trying to grapple with, and hopefully one day we'll see stories from me that are a little more typical Chinese or Eastern style.
It's interesting that you said that. As you were talking about the Chinese storytelling taking a little bit longer and going at a slower pace, I have this memory of one of my Chinese daughters taught me how to make dumplings from scratch, from the flour and rolling. It took 12 hours. It took all day long, but it was wonderful, and it was just a really slow pace, and it was easy. It was natural for her to just kind of be into it, and she kind of knew it. And it took me a long time to kind of sit back and just kind of relax and breathe and just enjoy the moment. And then when the dumplings were ready, man, they were out of this world. I am telling you, they were so good.
I really like that analogy.
Well, it's just, and I'm only sharing it because that's my experience. And, so I think there's so much we can learn from Chinese culture. There's so much we can learn from other Asian countries. So much we can learn from African culture and South American culture. And I think it's so silly that there's been this push, just to think American, just to think in this way. And this is the only culture that we should value. It's really limiting, I think.
Absolutely. And, I've actually sort of gone on this book buying kick where I'm pretty much only buying and reading stories from marginalized voices. Mm-hmm. I mean, not, I wouldn't say 100%, obviously. I think that's still pretty hard to do. But what I have noticed is that I'm reading really wonderful books, and I think I'm reading better books than I had been, in the past few years. And from those books, I'm learning so much about different cultures, but I'm also learning different storytelling techniques. And I really love that because that's something that as a very avid reader and writer, I'm always looking out for different ways to improve my craft. And when I read a book that makes me go, oh, this writer did something different and it's incredible, and I would love to try to see if, maybe I could use something similar in one of my books one day. That just makes me really happy because to me it says I'm leveling up and I'm just becoming, more knowledgeable and hopefully a better writer for it.
Yeah. I have to ask, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. You're not an expert at this. You're not speaking for all of China or Chinese culture. But I'm just reading that there's all this controversy revolving around Mulan. And
my gosh.
Live action Mulan. And I watched it with my wife. She dragged me in and said, sit down and watch it. And it was entertaining. But what's your take on it? Do you take a side on all the controversy that's swirling around?
So I actually have not seen the movie, but I have been listening to other podcast episodes or reading threads on Twitter or reading reviews online about the movie. So I would hold judgment until I actually have the chance to watch it. I'm kind of putting it off because the things I've heard have not been that great. But I would say that a lot of the issues that I've heard are in the movie stem from the fact that the writer's room was pretty much all white and the director was white. If you don't have, even though they did have Asian actors on the screen, which, still miles ahead of where we were just maybe 3-5 years ago, you can't have a Chinese story or a Chinese diaspora story that's told authentically without having Chinese writers in the room. There's just things that are very unique to being Chinese diaspora that, you just can't really get if you're not raised in that culture and environment. So there's this great Disney short, Bao. Have you seen it?
What is it?
It's called Bao. It's a Disney short. I think it's Pixar, actually. Short film?
I have not, no.
Oh my goodness. I highly recommend watching it. It's very short, which is why it's so short. It's only like, I forget, 20 minutes maybe?
Okay.
But it's like this story of like, it's hard to explain, and I won't give any spoilers, but it's like a dumpling.
Okay. That
was raised by a Chinese woman, but the dumpling is actually a metaphor for being like a Chinese child. It's just the experience that is portrayed in that short film is just so unique to being Chinese. It's really about, like, the Bao doesn't do what the mother wants, and that's something that, Asian Americans talk about all the time. My parents want me to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, but I want to be an artist, I want to be something else. Like, my parents sacrificed so much for me, and, like, I have to give back to them, but I also have to follow my heart. And that's one of the main messages in the film that, when I was watching it, I was tearing up because I was like, this was made by someone who's Asian diaspora for the Asian diaspora. And that's not something that I've heard, comes out of Mulan. And I'm not surprised after hearing that it was directed and written by white people, even though there are Chinese faces acting on the screen.
So how do we spell this short film so we can check it out?
Oh, Bao, B-A-O.
B-A-O. All right, we will put this on the list. One of the things, now we talked a lot about the differences in different Chinese styles and storytelling and pacing. That was one of the things about Mulan. It seemed to be really fast. Just bouncing all over the place like a superhero. Yeah. But one of the things I learned from hosting kids from China and bringing them and inviting them into our family is that it's really hard to say Chinese culture because there's so many Chinese cultures, and it's very different. There's all these ethnicities and all these dialects. But, we talked about the importance of having representation. One of the reasons I think, and one of the things that I just discovered having these kids who seem so different from cultures that seem so different from me, was that I quickly learned how much we had in common. And that humanity. Yeah. And, she would cry, and I knew very quickly what would make her cry and upset. And Jing Jing was a totally different person and had a totally different personality, but I could relate to so many things. How can we use Kidlit to kind of not only have people appreciate other cultures and understand the different cultures, but also hopefully through that understanding get to the point that we look different, we cook different foods, we speak different languages, but at the bottom line, we're human beings.
Jed, I just want to first say this is probably one of the favorite questions I've ever been asked, and I'm so happy that you made that connection about how, even though you're not Chinese, you can relate to these Chinese kids, and though we have many differences, we also have many connections. And I actually have a great story for you because while reading Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, which is, just a runaway bestseller young adult title, I distinctly remember there was a scene where the main character, she's eating spaghetti with hot dogs, which sounds like such a strange combination, but I related to it. And that it's because I grew up in a house that was, very frugal, just like the main character. And that was like one of just like the meals that my parents would make when they didn't have time, which wasn't a lot, to cook a full meal for us. We would just have like little random dishes like spaghetti and hot dogs. And I just remember feeling, I'm not black. The main character in Angie Thomas's book is black, right? I'm not black, but I just felt so connected to the character. In that moment, I was like, although I'm not black, I'm also a minority. I also grew up with frugal immigrant parents, and we grew up eating the same food and I didn't even know about it. I thought it was very unique to my family or, maybe just Chinese American parents. So yeah, that was one moment. I still remember it. And I read this book, gosh, it was probably 2-3 years ago. And I still remember that moment very distinctly.
Well, I think hot dogs and Spam and canned spaghetti and SpaghettiOs, I think it connects a lot of
probably
different races and cultures. I just have to share this with you. The girl who taught me how to cook dumplings, one of the things I love cooking is spaghetti. And something that absolutely blew us all away is the first night she had spaghetti with us, she went into the drawer and she took out her chopsticks to eat the spaghetti and meatballs. And at first it was like, what do you, and then I said, hey, so I got my chopsticks out and it was a pretty cool experience.
Wow, that's so great. Yeah, I love chopsticks.
Yeah, I do too, but I can only go for about 15 minutes and then it's like my hands get all weird and I lose ability, so. Hey, Katie, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you, to find out more about the Dragon Warrior and the other books that we know are going to be coming from you.
Yeah, of course. So my website is katiezhao.com. That's my name, KATIEZHAO.com. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram, and my handle is the same on both accounts. It's at KTZHAO author. So, wow. I think that's about it.
Yeah. Hey, we've had a great time talking about the Dragon Warrior, talking about Chinese mythology and storytelling, and just becoming, making a new friend with author Katie Zhao. Katie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed. It was so much fun.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Michael Coles. He is the creator and the driving force behind a great new app called Choose Your Reader. And it's really fascinating. It's a new way that we can add to our reading together experience with our kids. You'll find out more. Be sure to tune in the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, I'm really, really excited. If you are an author, you want to check out our Certified Great Read program. It's a wonderful program that can help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month, especially now when all of the traditional ways for an author, especially small indie authors, have to promote their books. You're not able, for the most part, to go to a school live and do a reading. You're not able to go to a library for the most part. Book signings are very, very different if they're happening at all. The Certified Great Read program is a way to really bring attention to your book. If our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And as I said, with that comes a number of fantastic tools. One of them being our newly redesigned and absolutely beautiful Reading with Your Kids seals of approval. Talk about attention getting. Just add this to your cover art, and man, oh man, it's going to turn heads. You can find out more about it. You can go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the Author Services button at the top of the page, scroll down, or you can go right to CertifiedGreatReads.com. That's CertifiedGreatReads.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, I want to thank Katie Zhao. Be sure to check out The Dragon Warrior. Also want to thank my team, starting with my amazing daughter, Alejandra Doherty, my producer, Fatima Khan, my author, Ambassador Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Audie the doggy for having my back here in the studio and not making any noise while we're talking. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.